Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by Ron Hetrick. He is a lead economist. I've got it here at Lightcast, the principal economist at Lightcast. He's a labor market economist, and we're going to talk everything to do about the labor market. He's written articles like The Demographic Drought, Who's Going to Do the Work, and most importantly and most recently, The Rising Storm. Now, here's the embarrassing part about this interview. My Nana, who friends of the podcast, if you're an OG Cameron Journal person, you'll know about my Nana. I've talked about her. I've written about her. I've written about dealing with technology with seniors and all this sort of thing. And so she found him and had his contact info, and I emailed him, and he was very kind. He's like, I don't usually, come on smaller podcasts like yours, but this hook is too good. So the only reason we have Mr. Hetrick today is because of my 85-year-old Nana, who's our unofficial booking department. We have an actual booking department, but our unofficial booking department, and we're so happy to have him. We had a little pre-call maybe a week ago, and we could have recorded that, and that could have been the show. Yeah. But we're going to retread that ground today. So thank you, and welcome, Ron, for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Well, Cameron, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. If it makes you feel any better, yes, last week I did interview John Didakis, who used to work for Wolf Blitzer. So that's fun times here. But I want to dive right into all of this stuff. But first, for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
So yeah, Ron Hetrick, I've been a labor economist for 32, 33 years now. I started with the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Washington, D.C., went to work for the largest staffing company in the country, kind of doing market analysis, and then came to MZ, which became Lightcast about 5 years ago. I've been writing since I was in my mid-20s on labor situations, and I've been a keynote speaker now for a number of years because of the recent articles. I wouldn't call myself a general purpose economist. It really does kind of focus in on labor and just the economy in general. But please do not ask me to pick stocks for you, or you will lose a lot of money.
That is quite fair. So let's dive right into sort of the labor market as it is today before we get to where it's going. Because we're gonna get into degrowth and all that sort of thing, which is kind of where we ended our little call last week. So right now, it appears the job market seems to be moribund. We're recording this on the 3rd of September, 2025. The job market feels like it's just absolutely moribund. I was poking around sort of earlier this year and looking for some opportunities, and there was a whole lot of nothing. And I'm autistic, look like this, so I'm used to the job market is not exactly a fan of people like me. That's all fine and well. Here's what worries me. I'm noticing normal people that look like you can't seem to find a job, sort of thing. And
we have our own problems.
That's all. Well, and I'm getting nearer to 40 than not anyway. So, but it's just like normal people who have never been without a job more than a month, 6 weeks. Yeah. They're now going online and being like, can't find a job, all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and I'm kind of like, when the normies can't find a job, I think we have a problem. And yet, even the July data showed a lot of layoffs, but steady hiring. What is going on out there? Why is it? What's the what's the data not showing us in the job market right now that job seekers seem to be finding?
Man, there's so much to unpack. I would say this: we have been in a malaise for a long time, and I love the word malaise. It's like we've been kind of uh, we're not in a depression. We're not excited. We are just stuck in this permanent state of whatever. And it
Shout out
started
Jimmy
when,
Carter.
the Fed started raising interest rates a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, and a lot of money that was in the market went out of the market. Well, that money was creating a lot of jobs, and
Mm.
now there's no excitement. When this all happened, I mean, you think go back to 22. So in 22, we still had people kind of coming off pandemic benefits, that they were kind of out of the labor market. You had a lot of private equity money going in the market, investing in all kinds of technology and finance, and also AI comes out of nowhere in 22. So we
Right.
start seeing all of this happens at one time. Well, you can't sustain that high. I mean, that would be like a drug addict trying to permanently stay at the highest level ever. It's like at some point you're going to have to correct for that. 23, we start to, we start raising interest rates, and around 22, 23, everything starts to cool off. Well, as time's going on, those factors that made things so exciting in 22 are all long gone. So AI, companies that were just like throwing all kinds of money at AI started looking at it and going, hey, you know what? We tried like 20 projects. I think only one of these is actually going to work for us, actually going to maybe generate revenue. So they stop investing like crazy and they start focusing in. All of these startup companies, it's time for them. They have to start making money. They have to start producing. There are a lot of these, especially in AI, they're losing money. And all of this is happening at the same time that there's no money coming in. Tariffs have created a lot of uncertainty for companies. And this is the most important thing. If I'm a company and I don't feel absolutely great about something, I'm not going to hire, because not only am I risking my company, but if I've got shareholders and they find out that I'm hiring when there's no real good reason to hire, now I'm jeopardizing everything. I'm going to start adding overhead. I'm going to add costs, but there's no reason. Well, why are you adding costs? Like, what are you seeing downstream revenue wise that's going to make you money for why you would want to add costs right now? And the answer is no one's seeing anything right now. So we just need to get a lot more. I would say we need a sustained period of people feeling good. Well, what gets you feeling good? And what makes you feel good is, I think interest rates are going to come down. I think people are going to get excited. I think people are going to want to buy things again. Well, no one feels that way right now. So
Nor will they for some
waiting.
time. Yeah. Well, and nor will they for some time for a bunch of other structural factors, of which tariffs are a piece of that.
Yep.
I think it's interesting about, this sort of, I had said in January, when in my 2025 futurism report for my exclusive LinkedIn newsletter, go subscribe, that this is the year AI has to actually do something. Like, it has to solve business problems at an enterprise level to get the big dollars at the big companies that are going to make this work. And when I wrote my halftime report in June, I was like, it's a mixed bag, but it appears that maybe AI is doing something. We're now at the end of the summer, heading into Q4 at the beginning of October, and I wouldn't write that now. That it looked rosier in June, but literally in 3 months, it's like now that's like, okay, is it actually going to be able to do anything? What problems is it actually solving? Microsoft is shutting down departments, all this sort of thing.
It's peeling back their investments in it, like.
Thank you. Yes, it's like so now it's kind of like, is AI really ever going to make the grade?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm a labor economist. I want to focus in on this part. So, when we looked at, let's go back to the rise of the robots. If everybody remembers, back in the 20 teens, somebody wrote this article called "The Rise of the Robots." And robots were going to come and they were going to take everybody's jobs. And at the time, I was speaking in the 20 teens. I said, "You wish." You really wish. And people are like, well, that's an odd take. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand what's happening in this country. Like, you need robotics, but we're not making the kind of progress that shows up on 60 Minutes. They're always so rosy. They always show some robot doing something and everybody goes, that's amazing. Well, it's a very controlled environment. They didn't show the robot falling over at the slightest whim. Like, it's all really impressive when it's controlled, but in a practical sense, it's still robots doing the same things robots have always been doing. They're in auto plants. They're in semiconductor plants. You get those one-offs that make people excited for a second. and it goes away. So I'm focusing on a labor side. And then I look at AI and I'm like, okay, in this country where, when I wrote Rising Storm and who's going to do the work, I was saying, focusing in on, we really need service people, people to take care of people, whether that's feeding them or healthcare or building them things. That's what we are lacking. And AI doesn't solve any of those problems. It doesn't do anything for that regard. You could say, well, you could AI a retail store and everything. And I'm like, you could, sure. Somebody's still going to have to be stocking shelves. Somebody's still going to have to be, guiding the robots around, helping them sweep. Somebody's got it. We tried automated registers. People stole everything. So you still needed people to sit there and watch the registers. There is room for technology. I'm not a person down on technology. I just look at it and think this is it. Like, this is what you're offering the world. What you're seeing is a lot of professional industries saying, well, we don't need, entry-level workers anymore in the professional ranks. We're going to use AI. And I go, well, that's the one market we actually had a ton of people. We don't have a shortage of college grads. We've got a plethora of college grads. They're everywhere. And mostly they're graduating with business degrees, which is really not a degree we need a whole lot anymore in this country. But 1 out of every students in our country are graduating with one. So you look at this and say, AI is solving a problem we don't have and not solving any of the problems that we do have. It's getting rid of workers that we don't necessarily need replaced, but it's not solving work that we really need to get done. And I think this all comes together. And just for me, I look at this and say, I can go back through, and this is important. You go back to the Industrial Revolution. We built things. We built a lot of things that created a lot of wealth for a lot of people. People who were working pretty lousy jobs now had jobs in factories. They were making more. They're mass producing products. Products sell. It generates GDP. We grow as an economy. The economy becomes richer. Then you have computers. The information revolution comes out in the 1970s. Computers are a product. It sells. It has software on it. The software sells. It made the IT industry. The IT industry created extraordinarily wealthy people, of which are some of the most wealthiest people in the world today, came out of an industry. Well, they made money because they were selling something. So Microsoft was selling Windows and they're selling programs. Computer companies were selling computers. And by the way, if you've ever owned a computer and you're a gamer, your things go out of date within a year. All of a sudden, your graphics card doesn't run the latest software. So you sell new graphics cards. You do all of this. And then we get to AI. And everybody's like, this is the next revolution. And I go, no, it's not. It's software. It's something that runs on computers. And by the way, we can't figure out how to productize it. If somebody comes up with something, somebody else comes up with it 10 minutes later. No one can get a market lead. They always say that's called moat. There's no moat. I can't get an innovative edge because everybody's using the same foundational tools. OpenAI, ChatGPT,
Perplexity,
competitors,
Gemini, Grok.
Yeah, all of those things. They're all using the same things. So everybody has access to the same things, generating the same things, and no one's making money. Least of which is OpenAI and their competitors. They're losing an enormous amount of money. They generate revenue, but it costs a lot to generate that revenue. And I keep sitting here going, okay, you haven't solved problems in the labor market. You are getting rid of jobs or threatening to get rid of jobs that we really never projected a shortage in any of those jobs anyway. And there's no R in your ROI. Where's the revenue? Okay, cost savings. You get cost savings. That's cute. That's good. You save some money right now. Okay, well, how are you going to save more money next year? I mean, I have AI is doing this now. That's not revenue. And if you're going to invest a lot in something, you're going to spend money on something, your hope is that it's going to value add something back to you, that you're going to make more money. And as of right now, we're just not seeing that. So the labor economist in me is just kind of angry because I'm like, this is what we're getting. It's not solving our bigger problems. And then the human part of me looks at this, or the sympathetic part of me looks at this and goes, you're disrupting a market that didn't need it and displacing people from jobs that we actually really needed. We need these people coming out of school to get jobs so that they can start learning and coming up the corporate ladder and they can start to contribute something down the line. It's just, to me, it's just a complete mismatch for where we needed to go.
No, that's interesting. And I love that because you're the first person who's kind of come on the show and been like, boo AI. Because I'll tell you what has happened. I've had a parade of people come on this show and tell me, Stephen Fair, who's the most famous of them, came on this show, and in the first 10 minutes of the show, he said, employment will no longer be a thing by 2030. And I said, I don't believe you. And I don't see how that's possible, sort of thing. I mean,
And it's not.
there's, yeah, yeah. There have been moments in the last couple years where I've kind of been like, oh, well, maybe Steven's right. They're laying off people. This ASC seems to be sticky. But then as I dig deeper and look through these experiences and all this type of thing, it seems less so. I saw a great anecdote on Twitter the other day. Some guy brought a new set of marketing copy, some text to a CEO, obviously small team, not Fortune 500. They would never read marketing text, but at a modest company sort of thing, brings to the CEO, and the CEO says this marketing copy is terrible. The guy says, well, it was written by the AI, and he's kind of like, okay, well then the AI is terrible. And he says, what should we do? We fired all the copywriters, and the CEO said, rehire them.
Yeah.
That was his solution was, oh, you fired all the writers. Well, get them on the phone, like sort of thing. So
From the beginning,
and these little anecdotes keep popping out of these moments where people are kind of like, well, that's not going to work. Get a job ad going, like sort of. You can start seeing these anecdotes, and so I love that analysis. It's disrupting things that don't need disruption. It's not really solving enough problems for businesses to really invest in it. But I feel like I think in the labor market for just kind of everyday people, because that's a lot of my work is talking with everyday people.
Yeah.
My next book on millennials is full of interviews with everyday people. It's my thing. There's this, I think, a lot of pain out there right now of a lot of people are going to get let go unnecessarily,
right,
only for companies to come back hat in hand 6 months from now and be kind of like, hey, buddy, so remember how you used to work here? Yeah. How'd you like to come back? Like, I feel like that's the conversation we're going to be having in Q1 of 25 is the great rehiring as companies figure out AI can't do it all, and you'd best get the copywriters back in here and a bunch of other people that you let go last year to save labor costs.
I think the biggest issue that you see is companies that already weren't doing well. They started off by saying, we're going to mandate return to office. It's a great way of laying off people without having to pay severance, because you say, hey, I need you to return to office. People are like, well, I can't return to office. And they're like, well, that sounds like a you problem, and goodbye. Yeah. And so you see the banks and you see the IT industries, they were the ones that really kind of led the way because they were both really hurting. And you look at their employment, it's really been taking a hit because they aren't doing well. So as you saw that happening, well, then who were the next companies to say, well, we're going to replace people with AI? It was the IT companies and the banks again, because they were like, we've got to figure out ways of trimming headcount. We can always hide it behind AI. So is AI advanced enough to really do a good job taking people's jobs? Not really. We can do some jobs really well, really menial things. But at the end of the day, it's a really convenient excuse to let go of people and say, well, it makes your stockholders excited because they go, oh, they're really advanced technology. They're replacing people with machines, and it's going to save them a lot of money. And I think we got to be very careful to not confuse, as I always say, economic malaise and people laying off because of that with true AI progression. And I think, we kind of, if you're really fair about these things, it's running out of training data. It's not really getting that much smarter. It still hallucinates. It needs a lot of manual intervention. And you start to look at it and you go, you've had a long runway here. I mean, you're a good 3 years in and you haven't done anything really that meaningful. And you have these people who prognosticate about the future with absolutely no evidence to support it. And I think as you're doing this, you're distracting people from doing the things they need to do to start to prepare us for a labor shortage. Especially since we've been relying almost purely on immigration to raise our labor numbers since 2019. Rather than sitting here investing money in something that's really not holding a lot of promise, why aren't you investing more money in, well, how do we fix a very broken immigration system? How do we look at certain industries and try to reimagine things like healthcare? And that's really, like I said, that's kind of where my beef is at. It comes across that I'm very anti-technology, but I just look at it and go, it's getting a lot of money. And I look at it right now and I go, it's not going to do anything valuable. I think we need to let that ship sail and start to try to solve some problems before we get into a lot of trouble, over the next 4 to 5 years when we start to have a meaningful problem with our labor force, because we still are supporting an aging population. They haven't passed away. They're going from producers and consumers to being consumers. And we've got to figure out ways of taking care of those consumers. And it's not going to be with this kind of technology. So, what are the answers? What are we developing? And will it be ready in 3 years? And I think that's a big question mark.
Yes, and that's the perfect segue into that topic, which we're going to get to in a moment. I feel like AI is kind of turning into the self-driving cars thing. I remember when I very first started this show way back in 2014. That was the hot thing at the time.
Oh, it's gonna
Trucking
happen.
jobs, driving jobs. By 2020, gone, done.
Yeah.
And all the demonstrations seem to be kind of like, yeah, driving jobs, all these hot startups do with trucking, all this sort of thing. And it's 2025, and yeah, we've got some Waymos in San Francisco that will run you around town, and that's about all the progress that we've made on that front.
That's exactly right.
Very true. They said 5 years. It's been a decade. Still haven't got it done. So I feel like we're starting to enter into that territory. The only problem is I think we dumped a lot more money into AI than we did self-driving vehicles, and that.
Well, then they were hoping AI would fix the self-driving vehicle problem. But life, first off, anytime you're interacting with humans. So if AI was interacting with AI, I think it would do okay. But you're interacting with humans, and if anybody knows who's ever driven, humans are unpredictable. They're nuanced. They react to you could predict, you can go down a path, but somebody's always going to be out there who's going to do something that you didn't quite expect. They came on, they saw a squirrel, they swerved really quickly, and a human would have gone, oh, I see that squirrel. They're probably going to swerve to miss that squirrel. But AI is just looking at behaviors and everything else. Then an accident happens. Then someone gets killed, and then you sue that company. And you're suing a technology. You're not really suing a human being anymore. You're suing a technology. And then they get two of those, and now they're out of business. And so all of this progress or hope that you had is taken away. We had a semi, I think it was through an undocumented immigrant, a semi hit somebody and killed him. I think it was in Florida recently. And it just caused a massive upheaval. This is a single incident, and it just caused this massive upheaval about what are we doing with immigration? And I look at that and I go, well, that is nothing. What if technology does that? And what if it does it 1 time, 5 times, 15 times? It's dead. And the more you try to put technology in a space where it's interacting with humans, that there is risk involved. So whether that's healthcare or things like driving, where it could cause an accident, the more that technology is getting themselves into the area of lawsuits that could be substantial. These companies already aren't making money. So now as you start doing these kind of things, it just puts this stuff in jeopardy. And that's why, I look at this and I say, if the technology can make robotics better, then great. But I've heard as recently as last year, people who were developing this assistive robot, they were saying, the problem is we're running out of training data. We're not quite sure what to do anymore because all the data can be absorbed has been absorbed. Well, they're like, well, we can come up with synthetic data. And they're like, okay, well, that's kind of manipulating the game. Synthetic data is made by, existing things. So you're really kind of redundant. And then you have what's called the law of recursion. So the more AI keeps hitting and starting to run into AI data, then it starts to degrade. So we may have already hit the ceiling, or if you get these increases. And I'm looking at them and what do we have? What do we have to show for this from a labor market side? How is, as I look into the future and go, boy, we got a real problem with construction. We have a real problem with healthcare. We're going to have to really make sure that we have skilled trades, people to crawl up into your attic and fix, your roof, people to go out to your air conditioning unit and kind of investigate it and see what's going on. Oh, it's a clogged pipe. AI doesn't solve any of those problems. It could come alongside a technician who's like, look, I'm looking at a broken air conditioning unit. And I don't know what to do. And they type into the system. The system says, try doing this. But the AI is not going to do that. The person's going to have to do that. Those are the jobs that we're very concerned about. You have to take care of people.
And that's one of the things that you said on our first phone calls. We have to be prepared for steady, basically no growth because demographics are starting to work against us. And, that's not what Western capitalism has been okay with. No. I think if you said that at the Central Committee in China, they would throw you out the window, like in the meme, straight out the window, into the street below, sort of thing. And that's also, I think, a bit frightening because that not having any growth for a long period of time creates knock-on economic issues and
Yep.
social issues that are quite damning. And we need to look no farther than Japan, who
Yeah.
couldn't the BOJ couldn't buy inflation for 25 years. And then the pandemic came along and they finally got inflation. They were the only one happy to have inflation.
Yeah,
Everyone's
right.
like, oh God, inflation. Japan's like, oh, thank God, inflation. Our economy is growing for the first time since the
Right.
90s. And so, and in my next book, America's Lost Generation, I look at millennials through the lens of Japan. So I got really into the Japan's economic problems, like
Yeah,
deep,
it's interesting.
deep in the sauce. It was crazy, and and I was and so many of their social issues are also mirrored by people my age, and the outlook, as I tell people, the outlook is not great
No.
for us, and especially when you start talking about pension programs, which Japan is facing a
Right.
pension shortage, and when you start looking at these things, that the future is not good. But then you scale that up to at least the United States, the developed world, possibly the whole planet. I mean, how will we service debt? How will
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these knock-on economic, social things that if you don't have growth, you cannot do and function. How do we have a modern industrialized or a post-industrialized economy without growth? Because our
Yeah.
friends in degrowth would say, well, that's fine. Let's start tearing stuff down and letting stuff rewild and shrink cities and shrink
Right.
things and let the planet go back to kind of the way it was, sort of thing. And just do less, live with
It's
less,
already
be
doing that in
less.
Japan. It's already doing that in Italy. I mean, they've already
Yeah,
abandoned the small towns. They're all moving to the cities and letting those
right.
towns be overtaken by nature. You're seeing evidence of this.
Yeah,
It's a mindset of saying we have always grown, all of us, anybody listening to this, I don't care how old you are.
right.
You have always been in a situation where the economy was expected to expand. Put money in the market, you're going to get a 7% return on average over time because
Right.
things are expanding. But you have an entire developed world which is either inverted, populations are shrinking, they are stagnant, or they will be inverting in another 10 to 15, 20 years. And
Right.
so as you do that, you start to think, well, that's my consuming population. And if I literally have less consumers, then I
Mhm.
can't sell more. So, what is economic growth when it's good to be nothing? Let's say zero becomes great. I didn't grow this past year, thank goodness, because I could have shrunk 5%, because my consuming base is falling, but I managed to hold still. That's no one's used to that. No one wants to
Well,
be told that flat is good. That's
but
a
I
completely
think I guess
foreign
my
term.
question is, I think what you're saying, the reality demographically speaking, is that conceivably in the as early as the mid 2030s, which is
Yes,
only 10
right,
years from now,
right.
some CEO could happily get on an earnings call and say, we successfully did not grow this year. And we
We
expect
didn't
that
shrink.
market hype. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah, we didn't
because
shrink.
we didn't shrink. That will be the I think what's that's a
Correct.
huge mindset is we didn't shrink. We just stayed flat, and that's exciting news. But that's a total mindset shift. I mean, walk
Yeah.
us through that, I guess, a
So let
little
me tell
bit.
you, like it works like this. So right now, the current Congressional Budget Office projection for the native-born population in the U.S. is that we will invert. We will begin shrinking the native-born population in 2033, 2032, 2033. Okay. So to have an inversion of a population means you have to first invert your labor force because they retire, right? I mean, you get about 65, 70 years old and you're leaving the labor force. So you're going to have a period where your labor force starts to contract. Well, guess what? Congratulations, you're in it right now. So had we taken immigration out for the past 5 years, you wouldn't have seen any growth in our labor force. That's going to get a lot more dramatic as we get closer to 2027, 28. And the point of Rising Storm was that this isn't the storm yet. We're not there. Like where we're seeing it is around 28 to 2030 when you go, wow, the math really starts to get ugly. We're going to start seeing really significant drop-offs in our graduating classes from high school, starting not this year, but the next year. And then it really gets bad. We're talking dramatically shrinking graduating classes in high school. We already know this. We know how many people are born. Well, you don't have to guess. And then you start to look at people who are approaching retirement age or already in it or retiring. And those numbers are very, very large. And so these numbers start to invert your labor force. Okay, so I invert my labor force. What happens when I retire? Well, I change my spending habits. I am no longer interested in the latest tech. I'm no longer interested in an EV. The vast majority of EV buyers are below the age of 45. So new technologies aren't as exciting. AI isn't exciting to an old person. I mean, heck, when I talked to my parents about AI, they were like, what? Who cares? It's what is it that they're concerned about? Well, they're concerned about healthcare, and they're concerned about going out to eat. They're concerned about being taken care of. They want a vacation. So they're looking for services. They want services. What they don't want is social media and tech and all of these other things that have thrived in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 20 teens. Now that this consuming population is aging out. So even things like financial services, well, who's most likely to buy financial services? Well, people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So the millennials are going to save financial services for a little bit. But even that starts to wane. And so you start to look at it and you go, everything that excites an investor, everything that excites an economy, we won't need. Like, that's not going to be our primary focus. And so you start looking around the globe going, I need young consumers. And then you go, young people, Africa has young people. No, they're 4% of global GDP. They neither buy anything of substance and they don't sell anything of substance. That's not going to work. So what are you going to do?
And the lift to get the bulk of the continent to that place is too gargantuan. I mean, you have pockets in South Africa. It hasn't worked
in thousands of years. Yeah.
You have pockets of it in Ghana. You have pockets of it in Egypt, but it's not It's not big enough to make a difference. Yeah.
It's not stable enough. It's not. The whole infrastructure needs to exist. Infrastructure takes decades. It doesn't happen in a year or two. It takes a long time. When people talked about runaway global population, what they weren't understanding was a lot of that population was occurring in South Sudan. And those people were not buying anything. So when you talk about these things in populations, you're not talking about a consuming population. And when what's capitalism concerned about and what business are concerned about is how do you keep growing business? And so the days of saying you did 5% last year, do 10% next year are already kind of going away now. And they will increasingly go away. And like I said, it will turn from grow 5% to let's hold. Can we just not lose more than 2% this coming year? And that you can survive. You can be profitable doing that. You can do all of those things. What you can't really do is grow.
And I think also to kind of bring the conversation a little full circle, you're not going to be hiring people. If we're going to stay steady, we'll hire for positions of people that leave or retire or get fired because we don't like them, all this sort of thing. But we're not going to be creating and adding on new positions.
Not to that degree, but yet if you start to go through an inversion, you're dying for every single person you can get. And the reason being is that what we're facing right now, we're seeing the biggest retirements we've ever seen in U.S. history occurring now. We've been seeing in the past several years, and we're seeing the tail end of the boomers now. My generation's now approaching retirement age. There's much fewer of us. When I retire, I'm consuming. So I need people to take care of all of these people. Well, that's going to be the situation for at least the next decade, probably longer than that, is this weight that goes towards the top end as you're basically, I always describe it as it's a tree where the trunk is getting thinner as the top end is getting bigger. So it's swaying and it's depending on this small part of this tree to take care of it. So I think I'm not concerned about a world of work. What I'm concerned about is a world of exciting work, because doing the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling that takes care of society, it neither pays extraordinarily well unless you're a doctor, nor is it that great. I mean, doing manual labor, working in a nursing home, doing home health, working in a restaurant. These aren't the sexiest jobs in the country. They also don't pay as well. They will probably see increases in pay. But you have to start to look at a world that says, what's a care society look like? Well, it's not as exciting as an IT explosive society, but those days are over. That ship has sailed. The IT explosion that you saw in the 1900s, 1990s, 2000s, and 2000 teens were because of this glut of very wealthy and now more advanced people had grown up with computers in the 70s, hitting their kind of peak. Well, that group that kind of really wanted all these things is departing. The rest of us are smaller. So we'll just be less of us doing these kind of things. You can still have innovation, and I hope we do. I hope that there's room to have really good innovation. There's a lot of things, my goodness, so many things we could invent that would make life better. And you could create an industry, and that industry could explode. And then other industries are going to die. They'll disappear. We don't do really well at retiring houses in this country. We also do well at retiring industries in this country. There's a tendency to want to just hold. So we have a lot of housing stock in this country that people don't want to live in. And we're not good at knocking that stuff down to the ground and just starting over, because they're like, well, it still has value. Let me just keep it on the market.
Right.
Same thing with industries. Industries, when they start to die, should probably just die. Instead, they sustain. They hang out. They do certain things. And I think it's something we've got to get really efficient at. There's definitely cases. I mean, obviously, there are industries that have died. But I think we go a little long on that. And we're going to have to get really efficient. If we want to see something new, we want to feed the mouths of something that's exciting, then you will see you have a finite amount of people. You can't feed all mouths.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we've known, it's been talked about so much about the, the coming kind of retiree explosion and what that means for home healthcare and nursing homes and all this type of thing. And, those of us who are older and have parents who are starting to get up there, we're all actively having these conversations sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I've got friends who've done that type of work, and it is horrifically unrewarding. The pay is terrible, sort of thing. A lot of it is very corporate owned, which makes it very difficult, and all this sort of thing. And so, it's like, the future is going to be close an elementary school, open a nursing home, possibly in the same building, sort of thing. That's a very kind of difficult thing going forward. I think my primary, I guess the primary thing I'm a little bit confused about is the boomers did a good job at having children. The millennials are a quite large generation. Xers not so much. But I feel like, given that the oldest of us millennials are 45 this year, and the youngest of us are 30, and our Gen X cousins are a decade beyond us of that, it seems to me that that group would kind of keep things going for a little while. Or are there just so many boomers left that, regardless of that, we're still stuck with this kind of overweighted, top-heavy problem?
The boomers were an epic population. You almost can't fathom it. So millennials are what's called the echo boom. So if you're looking at your population pyramid, boomers, gigantic, X is small. Then the boomers have millennial children, but they didn't really have births even close to the rate that they came into the world at. I mean, they're producing less than 2.0s, which is what our 2.1 replacement rate. They're not producing at that level. So the echo comes out, but it's not as big. Then the X's are already in, and they're already lower birth rates. So the Z's and Alphas come in, and they're really in. Well, the millennials and each one keeps getting worse. It's not really a linear issue. It's almost an exponential issue. Less people having less children produces a lot less. And that's what you're seeing around the world. That's why you see things like in Japan, a 0.9, 0.8 birth rate, Korea, a 0.5, 0.6 now, 0.6, I think. It gets exponentially worse. It doesn't get better. Once you start a population collapse, you can't reverse it. I mean, they've tried paying people to do it, which I think is a really bad idea, by the way. Hey, you don't want to have a child? What if I paid you to have a child? You don't want one, and now I'm going to give you money to do it. It seems a little kind of icky. Questionable, because probably all the wrong people would want to have children, because they're like, I get money for it.
Well, and I think even
baby mills here.
I think for a lot of millennials, I think a lot of us, wanted to have kids, but there was just, many millennials never got the jobs, the employment to even be able to afford to think about that. I think there is sort of a generational thing against having children. I think modern society, children tend to be an expensive liability more.
They're looked at. They've always been
and
expensive, but they're looked at more as that now than it would ever be fair to characterize. I think. I
always laugh. I'm the son of I'm the grandchild of sharecroppers, and my grandparents had 9 children, 7 boys and 2 brothers, sort of thing. And on their onion farm in 1940s Alabama, I understand why they had all those kids. Someone had to pick the onions. I get the logic. At
that was a big thing.
DIY labor force. none of their that they when they got off the farm, that's when the farming ended. My father was a semi-professional baseball player for 20 years and then drove a snow truck for the city of Denver. And so and I have a lot of cousins because all those 9 kids had a lot of
Yeah,
children,
sure.
a sort of thing. Because that's how that works, have a lot of kids, you end up with a lot of sort of thing. But then, you end up where no one's here with that. And so I think my father's the most that he had 4 across 3 wives, sort of thing. He had kind of had the most, but most everybody after that, they end up only having, I think children are just this kind of expensive liability, and people just kind of like, no, thank you, sort of thing. And then you have the economic story in that as well. And so you end up with this sort of odd situation where millennials could have had more children, maybe, and didn't
Done. The
for a
ship has sailed.
variety of different factors.
Yeah.
We're too old now. That ship is, that time is kind of gone.
Right.
Although there has been a little bit of a post-pandemic baby bump, which I think is interesting.
Not really. Last year was the lowest birth rate in U.S. history.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, Peter Zine was going on about a post-pandemic baby bump. That's where I got that idea from. But yeah. And so you got this, just sort of shrinking population sort of thing. And so basically what you're saying is we're kind of stuck. We can't necessarily rely on immigration anymore. And based upon the Trump administration, it appears that we don't want to. Based upon the birth rates in South America and elsewhere, right, I don't think we're going to have much of an immigration problem by the middle of next decade. Who's going to come?
Correct.
Because they're not having kids anymore, sort of thing. Right. And so I guess because we're getting close to the hour and I have a recording at 4. I guess one of my final questions would be, how do you think we can reconstruct society, in 20 years? I'm 37 years old, so by the time I'm getting close to 60, my parents will be gone. We hope, sort of thing. My parents will be gone, grandparents will be gone, all this type of thing. When we're in our late 50s, early 60s, how do we construct a society that's going to have less people than we have today?
There's multiple examples. Japan's been shrinking since 2010. If you went to Japan right now, you'd never even know that was a population that's completely, disappearing. They are having a lot of problems, no doubt about it. But to the average consumer, the average person walking the streets, they don't necessarily see those things. What it is it's getting, when you have a plethora of people, when you have so many people, the amount of service you can give people, the amount of options you can give people are very extraordinary. As you have less and less, the amount of service and options go way down. So we had a taste of this in 21 and 22. We had a very significant labor shortage. We had 12 million job openings at one point. Everybody's feeling a lot of pain. Well, what did that look like? Well, it looked like you ordered a bike and you waited a year and a half to get a bike. It meant that price of food got a lot more expensive because there wasn't a lot of people to work, in a poultry place to cut chicken or to process eggs. It makes certain things become more expensive. Certain things you just can't get. Certain things you're going to have to queue for. Certain things you have to reimagine. So healthcare, we were talking about. The hospital model is not a sustainable model going forward. Like saying, well, I'm just going to keep shoving more people in this building. Well, you're only as good as the amount of nurses and doctors that you have. What makes more sense is get them into their homes, like shove them into their homes and have care there, or teach people how to take care of themselves, or teach family members how to take care of them. We have a significant problem in this country with the amount of people that are getting old and do not have family members. That's something we're going to have to figure out. Well, how do we get these people into a place where they're not in a hospital, but they're not, how are we going to have a care facility? How are we going to have a home health, a rotating system that allows us to take care of more people? These are problems. They're not impossible. They can be solved. It starts by working on that now and not waiting until you're desperate. What happened in 21, 22, there wasn't a workforce. So what was the answer to everything? I'm going to outpay. And so all of these, every fast food place in the area, every store starts putting signs out. We're paying this now. We're paying this $12, $14, $16, $18 an hour. That's not the answer. That's not even a good Band-Aid. It's a desperation move that just takes the low wage and just busts it way up. But then everything becomes more expensive. And now everybody's like crying about how expensive everything is. It's like, that's what happens when you panic. I don't want people to panic. What I want you to do is go, I see a problem coming in construction. We're going to have people willing to put roofs on houses. And mostly we've been using a lot of immigrants to do that. Well, what if you don't have them? Well, how could we make the roofing process a much more enjoyable job. Well, maybe it's always going to stink. Yeah, okay, I get it. But how can you make it better? How can we look at healthcare and go, how can we make it so that not everybody goes to the emergency room? Why in the world is everybody walking through an emergency room door? There was a study done by one firm that said 70% of people in an emergency room had no business being in an emergency room. They could have been taken care of somewhere else, could have never even left their house. But every time you call your doctor, they go, if this is an emergency, call, dial 911. And you're like, well, I mean, I just don't know if my medication's just doing something weird to me. Off you go to the emergency room. Not going to work. You have to rethink these things, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So start right now. Think about how these things could be better. How could you make it better?
And my buddy's a paramedic, and he talks about community paramedicine because paramedics have a lot of powers. They're kind of, mini doctors sort of thing.
Yeah, they are.
And one of the kind of weird things about our region of this country is he's like, we actually are one of the few places that still have community paramedicine. And he's kind of like, because he's recently left medical. He's like, if I could just go around to people's houses and help solve small problems they don't really need to go to the hospital for, I would do that. Like, he's like, I don't want to be in an ambulance anymore, going and chasing after the crazies, but I would go around and help, Mrs. Austenstein with her, sort of thing. And she can just, call me up and I'll stop on by sort of thing. I think things like that jump to my mind because I know someone about that sort of thing. That could be a much better solution. Don't come to us, we'll come to you sort of thing. Things like that. But I find that so interesting. Start to solve these problems now, make this a little bit. I mean, that could be great industrial innovation, making roofing easier and less stressful.
Why are we jumping a lot together? That's the kind of,
that's
the whole thing I had said earlier. It's like, I still want to repeat myself. I'm not anti-AI. I'm not anti-robotics. I love the concept of using technology to take a job that's awful and make it less awful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the really awful jobs look like they're going to remain awful because we're not really, in order to get your big check back. So if I'm in the AI space and I need to make a lot of money to justify the billions I put in, who are the companies that are probably going to spend the most? Well, they're going to be large enterprise organizations, probably in the IT, finance, or insurance space. They're not going to be franchised electricians. They're not going to be the local contractor roofing company. It's not going to be them. They're going to write small checks. Well, that's not going to work. I need a big check because I've just invested $100 billion in this, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get that money back.
Right.
It is a fundamental problem that we're not solving. And I'm looking at the window going, your window's closing, and you're not solving this problem. And that is a big problem.
Well, and I think we also, I think that also drives urbanization, which gets into housing. And we live in a country that people don't, I think one of the dirty secrets about housing is people don't really want to live in apartments and dense housing. We're Americans. We don't like being around, especially, I'm from out West. There's nothing around us. And I think for a lot of Americans, we kind of like that. We don't want to be too close to people sort of thing. And so I think that, with increasing urbanization, people moving to more hubs as small towns, even some small cities, basically die out. So sort of thing. My mom and I, she's from the Eastern Plains of Colorado and West Texas, and she keeps, she's like, well, I don't understand how this is going to help anyone in Ovid, Colorado. I said, Mom, Ovid, Colorado has 400 people. It's not going to exist by the middle of this century.
That's correct.
So we needn't concern ourselves with that, Mom. I'm sorry. Sort of thing. And of course, she views it as a negative, and I understand that was her, stomping grounds and all sort of things. So it's sad to see it go. But yes, I mean, all of these problems kind of taken together. I think the one message that I take away from this, and then we're going to close out, is we're going to lose some small towns, maybe some modest cities. Things are going to close. Things are going to get torn down. And there's going to be a certain sort of retreat, and it may profoundly affect our lives. A lot of towns may not have fast food locations because there's no one to work in them. I mean, that's kind of what I've gathered from this conversation is that's the new reality, and we must learn to adjust to it.
And it shouldn't scare people to death. You have to let things change. You have to let them change. You have to let small markets die. You have to. That's what happened. Like I said, Japan, Korea, Italy, probably keep going. There's so many countries that their small towns are disappearing. That's okay. We had mining towns in the U.S. in the 1800s. They're gone now. It happens. You have to.
I'm from Colorado. Dozens. We have old towns lying around like kitschy things on a mantelpiece. Like, oh yeah, that over there, that was a mining tent. Well, it's dry and rotting. Yeah, but we just leave it there. No one cares. Like that's
So we use it for ghost hunting shows now, but that'll be that's about the best use we have for it.
Call Zach Bagans. That's yes, but I think the final final. I mean, the job market moving forward seems a bit dire because I think you're facing a situation where, especially for Gen Zers, Gen Alpha here soon, it's going to be the jobs that even their older siblings that they don't have, older cousins, maybe older friends, are not going to exist. And the future of work is going to be a lot of manual labor, relatively low pay, and based upon that, a general decrease in standards of living for all parties involved.
It could happen. Or the need for these people becomes so great that, like what you're seeing in skilled trades, you start to see a lot of six-figured people doing these jobs. You're seeing, like we saw when we wrote Who's Going to Do the Work, you see construction workers in New York City making $50 an hour because they have to put the building up and they got to do it quick. And so I'm going to pay to do that. So there can be a rebalancing where I think the greater concern is not necessarily there. I look at it from the professional world and I go, we just don't need technology like we used to. We don't need the amount of financial services that we used to, and technology will continue to disrupt those spaces. So you have a lot of people graduating with a lot of debt into a market that really doesn't need as many college grads because it's not the expanding population with expanding technology services and financial services that you would witness for the past 50 years. This is a different society. It's an aging society. It's a more practical society. So all of those things that created the big paychecks, they're kind of going away. And there's going to be less of a need for those kind of things. Not now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, a couple of years. In time. That's what I'm saying is right now, don't confuse with malaise with a complete, destruction of the American dream. We're not there yet. I think the storm is still a couple of years away. What's happening right now is a product of a lot of political and social dynamics that could be undone. We could see interest rates come down if we could just stabilize things like tariffs, the threat of inflation. But we keep doing things to kind of shoot ourselves in the foot to get things better. But I still think the economy can be a lot better than it is right now. I think right now we're in a down spell. It will get better. I hope a year or two from now we're looking back and going, well, that really stunk back in 25. That's my dream. And I think we will to a degree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I gotta go do a morning zoo live with my friends, including the paramedics. So thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. This has been absolutely delightful. It was everything I wanted and more. We could easily do another hour of this, and we're not going to, though. Why don't you tell us where we can keep up with you online and where people can stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm quite an active poster typically on LinkedIn. Ron.L.Hetrick, I think, is where I'm at on LinkedIn. Lightcast, lightcast.io. It's light and CAST, one word, lightcast.io. All of my research papers are on there. Who's going to do the work? Demographic drought, rising storm. We don't charge anything for them. These are big research papers. I do them for the world. I'm trying to help the world be a better place. I'm constantly writing. I'm just finished something on healthcare. I'm writing something right now about skills. Like I'm always involved and always writing things. So just kind of stay around. If you're always just like, I'm just curious about what the truth is around what the housing market looks like and everything, I highly just suggest follow me on LinkedIn, scroll back through my previous posts. I'm very data driven, so you're going to see a lot of data, but I think it just will help you put your mind at ease about some things and help solve some of the problems that you hear everybody kind of freaking out about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you love a good data. I love a good narrative. We should collaborate sometime, and do some clever storytelling at some point.
Yeah, but I'm more the data guy than I am the narrative guy, but I like the narrative too.
Yeah. No. That's my wheelhouse. That's what could make us a great peanut butter cup. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron, for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you, Cameron. Take care.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal Podcast.